俺が君に協力するだろう。とにかく計画を立てないとな。
計画なんてそんなに複雑に考える必要あるの？
My daughter! Yeah, another week, another Woo review. For this Lucila segue, I actually kind of contemplated on not making a video for it, and that is simply because I don't have that much to say about it. Don't get me wrong, it ended up being a good quest in the end, but it really didn't add much in terms of overall story, and in my opinion, it just didn't have as much depth to analyze as, like, let's say, the Denia segue, for example. Like, it was just a quick and short segue to wrap up the remaining loose ends from the 3.3 story and the LAHAI-ROI arc. Like, now I do want to say that while this quest didn't have the most insane story ever, I think it was still one of the most unique Wuwa quests to date. And I say that because it really had no action in it. As some people would call it, hype and aura moments. It didn't have that. And I'm not calling that out as a bad thing. I actually really like the direction this quest took in the second half. Like, 95% of it was just dialogue, and I think it was a good thing. The climax of this story was literally just a debate that lasted around 15 minutes, and I was engaged the entire time. Like, in fact, the parts where there was action in the story, it actually detracted from the quest in my opinion. Like, there was this one point where you are fighting Lucila's inner shadow, and it was just this generic mob, and I think it just kind of felt forced in. Like, they just forced that fight in, and the only reason they did was to give the players an opportunity to try Lucila's gameplay. But anyways, because this quest was so dialogue heavy, that was also to its detriment. And what I mean by that is the pacing was pretty slow. Like, I wasn't gripped by the plot until I was, like, I don't know, 2/3 into the quest, and that was because I didn't find the compelling hook until we entered that elevator with Lucila. Like, obviously the premise of this quest is that the investors are pulling out of the synchronous program, and we are trying to figure out what Lucila's plan was to solve this, and why she was hiding it. But it took so long to get to that reveal, and I felt that there weren't enough compelling plot points to get to what her plan was, like, quickly enough. Like, overall, I think my issue with the pacing is just that the parts where we were touring with Alto, seeing the value and failures of the synchronous, was just a bit too overdone and overbearing. Like, I got the point pretty quickly on the surface. It's not a good look for the synchronous program, but then we see why they're struggling so badly, but we still see the potential that they can provide. I just felt like they could have condensed that whole section and made that point a lot tighter. As this was a segue, I want to compare it to the Denia segue last patch, which I believe is one of the best quests in WoW. I thought that quest was paced and structured perfectly. Like, immediately at the start of that story, I was pulled in because it tells you right off the bat that Denia only has a week left to live. That is an extremely compelling hook. And even beyond that, the scenes with Sigrika, for example, you could tell that something was going on with Denia, furthering your interest in what was happening with her character. And then it gets to that scene on the bench where Denia expresses her guilt. It gets to that fairly quickly. And so, like, my point of comparing them is just that Denia segue achieved that payoff in a reasonable amount of time compared to this new one. Like, it was just lacking that tight pacing and writing of the Denia segue. But once again, that is just my opinion. I don't know. Maybe you really liked how goofy it was in the first half of the quest, but besides the pacing, like I said, I thought the overall story and last hour or so of the quest was really good. Like, it tackled themes of chasing ideals versus accepting reality, which I think is something a lot of people can relate to. And despite my issues with the pacing, the quest did a good job with initially making you side with the investors. Because when you think about it, the synchronous program really did lose its purpose without the extra strider. But then, of course, the quest shows you how they can still find new meaning through Lucila's character arc. And that's another thing. I was very interested going into this story. Where could they possibly take her character after... because we kind of got her backstory back in 3.2 during the segue. But instead, this quest explored why she cares so much for the students and the responsibility she feels for an accident that happened in the past. And then it gets to that plot twist where she didn't actually have a concrete solution for the investors this entire time because of the former disaster. Like, Lucila's proposal would basically mean putting the lives of the students she cares so much for at risk. would the students really be willing to accept that? But Lucilla eventually comes to the realization that they would, despite the setback of that accident and the risk that accident represented. Like, Rover reminds Lucilla that the students would accept any proposal she provides. So when her dream is to see the dreams of her students come true, she resolves to embrace that and continue chasing her ideals. The students are willing to take that risk to go to the stars, and that has always been the goal of the Space Truck Collective. So I think it ended up making perfect sense why they would end up accepting Lucilla's proposal. I thought that resolution was pretty beautiful and a really fitting way to end this whole LAHAI-ROI arc. But that kind of leads me to my final point. Where do we even go from here? Like, I'm assuming this is the final chapter of LAHAI-ROI, and while it wrapped up all the loose ends, it really didn't feel like a finale to me. I would say the 2.7 Arena Cena finale did a much better job at giving a sense of farewell, I guess, with that scene of everyone sending us off at the very first place we arrived in Regula. This quest didn't really do a scene like that, despite, if I'm correct, every LAHAI-ROI character showed up. Even Hiyuki made a cameo. Even Shisha showed up. Like, they didn't forget they didn't forget about Chisa. They actually gave her lines and she used her forte. So is this really the finale of LAHAI-ROI? If that's the case, is this the last time we will see all these characters, or will they show up one more time in the story next patch before we head off to Mangzhou? How will we even get to Mangzhou? I don't know. I'm very curious how they will pull this off. That was basically my only other wish for this quest. I wish they gave us some sort of teaser for the new region, but that's basically all I wanted to say about this story. I guess I had a bit more to talk about than I expected. Really excited for the next arc. If I had to end this video with my rating of this quest, 10 out of 10. Imit showed up.